Hi, Gayane. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well indeed. Guys, so we today are having a FaceTime interview with Gayane, who did our Vietnam program in April of 2016. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a little
More
bit
than a
over a
year
year
ago.
now. Yeah, it's crazy how time passes real fast, eh? Excellent. Okay, well, for those of you that don't know me yet, or this is your first time you've watched one of these lives, my name is Ben Hesketh. I'm one of the TEFL team, and I'll be the one talking to Gayane today. So Gayane, I'm really interested. We have had a little chat before this, and I know you've had a great experience in Vietnam, which is brilliant. But the first thing I want to ask is always, tell me what you really wanted to get from this experience. Like, what did you set out to achieve when you went on this TEFL journey?
Okay. For me, the number one goal when I just started my TEFL journey was to try myself in a new career, in a new field, and to find a job that would be a little bit more meaningful than what I was doing before that. Because I used to work in a big corporation in the banking sphere, and I was a little bit tired of that job. So I was looking for something completely different, and I wanted a job that would, on the one hand, challenge me, and on the other hand, give me some new skills, and also give me some more purposeful and meaningful job. And I can, looking back now at the past year, I can say that I completely achieved that goal, and I had an awesome experience in Vietnam. And thanks to TEFL Heaven for that, because I'm really happy that I found this course, because it kind of opened the door for me into these new opportunities of teaching, and that was really great.
Yeah, fantastic. That's fantastic. So why did you even go to Vietnam in the first place? You could have chosen lots of different locations. There's loads of popular places. What drew you there?
Initially, I only had one criteria. I had the options of Thailand and Vietnam, because I'm non-native speaker, and out of all the countries that are on offer, those two seemed to be the most suitable ones for the non-native speakers. So I had two options. I'd been to Thailand, so I'd never been to Vietnam, and I didn't know anything about that country. So I said, why not? And I booked the course.
Yeah.
And it just turned out to be a very awesome experience. I didn't do almost any research prior to going about the country, because I wanted to discover everything firsthand when I just arrived there. And it was really fun and very exciting experience to have it that way.
Yeah, that's great. So, I mean, most people, when they go to a country, they usually have some kind of preconceptions or, things that you hear about through friends or family or just generally media. How did it compare, the kind of reality of being there and living in the country, compared to maybe some of the preconceptions and things that, float around on the media about Vietnam?
Well, one preconception and one thing that I was kind of hearing from all different people was about people of Vietnam, because I didn't know much about the country, but whoever I was talking to who had been there or who had worked with some people from Vietnam, everyone was saying that, Vietnamese people are just great, they are awesome, they are kind, they are friendly. And when I went there, I discovered that it really was the case. It's really absolutely true. That's the most awesome part of my experience. People are very, very nice, very kind, very helpful, very friendly, and I made awesome friends there. And when you interact with local people during your experience, that makes the whole experience so much more interesting and so much fuller, and you get a much richer knowledge of the country and of the culture. So people, that was number one kind of positive preconception that I had. About everything else, I had some myths that were broken for myself. The one was I was always thinking that Vietnam is a Buddhist country. I kind of had this perception, and well, it turned out that it's far from being Buddhists in the sense of like Thailand or some other Buddhist countries. So it was something that was a little bit surprising for me. And that one part of that is also about the food, because I was thinking, okay, it's a Buddhist country, I'm vegetarian, so I won't have any problems having vegetarian food there. And then I arrived in Vietnam and I found out that it's not really the case. So that's one
Right.
of the things that I had a conception in my mind, and then it didn't work out. Other than that, I had very, very little information about the country, and I on purpose, I didn't want to do any prior research. I just wanted to go there and to be completely open to new experiences without having any preconceptions or any expectations. And I found out that that's probably the best way to travel, when you go with no expectations and you're open to new experiences.
Yeah, I think it's that being open-minded, isn't it, and embracing whatever's set before you. So
yeah,
great. So I know you've in the year that you were over there, you had two different jobs. One straight after the training for about 6 months, and then another one in a different location. And I know from previous conversations that they were quite contrasting locations and kind of different experiences. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? And, how the first differed from the second, and so forth.
Yeah. So my first experience in Vietnam was actually the 1 month training itself, which was in Ho Chi Minh City, which is a crazy city. It's just absolutely amazing, and it's insane. It has the most dangerous traffic in the world. It's like completely crazy city. And then right after the course was over, actually even before the course was over, I had my first job offer from the school, and I was sent to a small town called Bao Loc in the Central Highlands of Vietnam. It's near the city of Đà Lạt. And after Saigon, after Ho Chi Minh, I came to this very little town. It had a population of about 200,000 people, which for Vietnam is very small. So it's basically like a village, so a rural area with beautiful nature, all hills and forests and waterfalls and whatnot. So it was a very big contrast after Ho Chi Minh, but I absolutely loved that experience. And I was the only foreigner in that town for that time. And I quickly mentioned before, it was just living like a celebrity, like a superstar there, because everyone knows you. Like you walk in the street, because no one knew anything about my country. No one knew anything about Armenia. And I was saying Armenia, and they're like, "Oh, America." I'm like, "No, not America, Armenia." "Oh, you're American. So I kind of got used to the fact that they made me American. So everyone was calling me American, and I was like, okay, if that's easier. So I was the only foreigner, and that's actually one of the things that I didn't know about Vietnam. I was hoping that because it has lots of tourists and many millions of people go there, I would never expect that the situation with English language would be like that, because very, very few people speak English, even especially if you're in smaller places where not that many tourists are available. So almost no one spoke English, so I had to learn some basic Vietnamese, and I had to do everything using pantomime and Google Translate. So basically every day of my life there, I was just sending tons of blessings to people who invented Google Translate and Google Maps, because these two applications absolutely saved my life. Yeah. And it was awesome. It was an awesome experience, because even if people do not speak English, even if you cannot communicate fluently with them, they just go out of their way to help you in whatever they can. They're just awesome people. I absolutely had amazing people-related experiences in Vietnam. So that was my first job in this little town. And then after that, I got another job in a city called Ha Long, which is one of the most touristic places in Vietnam. It's the town near the Ha Long Bay in the north of Vietnam. And that was a totally different experience, because it's a bigger city. It's again like crazy with traffic and lots of construction works being heavily developed, huge investments. So it was just, life was very, very crazy compared to the smaller town where I used to live. And another big difference for me was in my previous job, I was working only in private language centers. In Ha Long, I started working also in public schools. So it was a totally different experience working with kids in the public schools. That was also something that I had to learn from scratch, because I didn't have any experience of that. That was also very nice.
Wow. So it was quite a contrasting experience. And dare I ask, which did you prefer?
I liked both, actually. when I just started working, because I didn't have much teaching experience. When I just started working, I was trying to avoid kids classes as much as I could. I was like, okay, give me teenagers, give me adults. I cannot work with kids because I was scared. I didn't know what to do with them. And then on the first time when I was teaching a kids class, it just happened accidentally. I had to cover for another teacher, so I didn't have any time for preparation. I didn't even know what textbook they were studying, so they just basically opened the door, pushed me in the classroom, and just slammed the door behind me, so I couldn't run away. And after that, it was a 2-hour class with 25 5-year-old kids, and it was the most terrifying experience for me. But after that, I just asked the school to give me more kids classes. So, and I really enjoyed it. And in my second experience, just for everyone's background information, in private language schools, you usually work in groups of 10 to maximum 15 students in one group if it's a private language center in Vietnam. If you get to teach in public schools, you can get up to 45 kids in one class. So in my second job in Halong City, I was sent to public schools, and I had classrooms with 45 kids, and it was a totally different experience because it's totally different classroom management, it's totally different energy, and I just had to learn everything from scratch, and it was very awesome. It was just very good experience, very challenging, but also very rewarding and very fulfilling experience.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like your first experience of teaching the younger one was definitely a baptism of fire. Like you got thrown in the deep end, but
yeah, it definitely was.
Yeah, but that's really good. And sometimes it's a good thing, isn't it? Because kind of sometimes when you get thrown into those situations, you are forced to just think outside of the box. You're forced to do things that you wouldn't do before. And actually, like you said, at the end of it, you ended up asking for another class of younger students. So it obviously, in the end, was a really positive experience, even though it wasn't something that you chosen to do. So that's really, really good. Great. Well, fantastic experiences, and it's nice to have a little bit of contrast, isn't it? If you do the same thing, consistently, then it can get a little bit stale. So there's three things I always like to ask people in these interviews that are kind of like the three big things that people are always concerned about when they're going and living and teaching in any foreign country. And the first one is, how did you find living on the salary? Now, I know Vietnam, compared to a lot of countries, is actually generally pretty good. But what was your experience of being able to sustain and live on the salary that you earn?
Well, the salaries are actually quite high compared to the living cost. The living cost is very low. So the salary that you get as a foreign teacher is, I can just 100% certainly say, is just more than enough. So I was able to live very comfortably, plus have some savings, plus spend some money on travels, etc. So it's actually very good because the cost of living is very, very low there. Renting a house, I don't know, food, travel, transportation, everything is very cheap. It will depend on the city, of course, because it's more expensive in the bigger cities, like in Halong, where I had my second job, and it was a very touristic place. Everything was about 1.5 up to 2 times more expensive than my previous place, but still with the salary of a foreign teacher, I could very comfortably live and have some savings as well. So that's not something
great.
that anyone should worry. If you have a full-time job, I'd say even if you have a part-time job, but you're just one person, that should be enough to cover all your expenses and your travel costs and give you some extra money for savings.
That's great. That's nice. That's nice because I mean, a lot of people when they go out into this experience, some of them are off the back end of finishing their degrees, and sometimes they want to put some money aside for like student loans when they get back. So that's good to know. That's definitely good to know. So the second big thing is always accommodation. People want to know that they've got a roof over their heads, when they arrive, and obviously the accommodation is included during the 4 weeks training over there. But after the training, how easy was it to secure your long-term accommodation?
Well, in my first job, I was renting a house, and the company was paying 50% of it. So I was paying a ridiculously low rent of $100 per month, and about $10, less than $10 for utilities per month, like electricity, water, whatever.
Basically free.
But it was in a small town. It was in a small town, and it was like a 2-floor house with all furniture, like 1 bedroom, 1 big living room, kitchen, everything equipped, and very nice place, very close to my school as well. So that was very, very cheap, and I was very happy about that. In Halong, which is a busier city and bigger city and more touristic city, it was a little bit more difficult to find accommodation. I was living in a hotel there. Again, very nice location, very good facilities, and actually quite cheap as well. But depending on the location, especially in the north, for example, I found that renting accommodation is a little bit more problematic because you have to do it long term. If you're renting a house, you have to do it long term, and the landlords tend to ask for like a 2 or 3 months deposit or advance payments, etc. So that was in the north. I found it a little bit more problematic than in the south where I used to live before, because the previous one, I just rented it with no problems. In the north, it was a little bit more difficult, but it's still, you can find very nice housing options, both like in new apartments and renting a room in a house, etc. In Vietnam, one thing that people should mind is that when you rent a house or a hotel, doesn't matter, long term, you need to get registered with the police, which is basically the landlord takes your passport to the police and then just asks the passport every month to renew this registration. But it's nothing scary. I was a bit scared because like the landlady would come and say, I need your passport. She was actually taking the original passport and taking it to the police. But that's the way. Yeah, that's the way it works. And eventually it's possible to find housing for different budgets.
Yeah,
the cost will depend on the city. Big cities are more expensive, so people tend to like rent a big house and then share the rooms. That's also a good option. In smaller places, you can find something quite cheap and very convenient.
Yeah. That's great, and that's really insightful. So thank you for providing that information. And the last big question is always about visas. How did you find getting on with sorting out visas while you're over there?
Yeah, visa is actually one thing that I wish I could get a little bit more information before going to Vietnam, because getting a tourist visa is very, very easy and very, very cheap. You just apply online, you get this approval letter, confirmation letter, whatever, and then you just get the visa stamped in your passport in there. So very easy and very cheap. But once you have to deal with the long-term visas, they tend to get and the work permit, because these are 2 different documents. You have to have a business visa plus a work permit to work fully legally, and that's where you get lots of like extra costs, and it's paperwork, and it's something that you will not be able to find much information online. So this is something that people who are considering the program should take into consideration, because there are some papers that you need to take care of before you go, like police check and these sort of things. There are some things that you have to do once you're in the country, like a local police check or medical check, which costs money, so you have to be aware about that. Plus, there are some fees that your employer pays for you, and that's also another thing that people should consider, because normally employers charge this money from you if you terminate your contract before the end date. So visas are actually a little bit complicated issue, and I wish I could have a bit more information about that when I was just starting. But it's still. Yeah, my advice would be to discuss visa and work permit related issues in very, very detail with your employer before starting the course, and just discuss the cost sharing arrangements, whatever considerations you may have, because that's something that you don't find much information in English online, and that's something that people should be aware of.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that, because it's really important that people do understand, the ins and outs and what is going to be expected of them in order to get the long-term work permit, and the difference between the work permit and the visa and how the two come together. So that's really insightful. So thank you very much.
I had to go through this process 2 times. So if anyone is interested or anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to help. I am in the TEFL Heaven community group. So if any potential participants have any problems or questions, I'm more than happy to help whatever I can.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for extending that invitation. So there you go, guys. You know who to contact if you have any questions about the visa process for Vietnam. So one thing that people are often concerned about, or one thing that people always think about, is when they're in a foreign country, everyone wants to know that they have friends, or they're going to make friends. What's been your experience in terms of the sort of social side of the course, and also the social side of being in a TEFL position over there?
Oh, it's actually very, very easy to make friends with people in Vietnam. I mean, the local people, Vietnamese people, because as I said, they are very friendly, very nice, very open, and they are very eager also to communicate with foreigners. And so that makes communication and finding friends, making friends very easy. So I had some colleagues with whom I made friends. I had some students, because I had some adult classes. So my students became also my friends, and they're very nice, because when you get to know them, they let you into their families, they invite you to their houses, you go to trips together. And it's one thing when you travel with foreigners or by yourself, and it's a totally different experience when you travel with local people and you listen to their stories, you share meals in their houses, you get to know the in-house traditions and everything. So it was absolutely awesome. What about making friends with foreigners? It will depend on your location. If you are in a city where there are many expats, it's obviously very easy to make friends and hang out, because in most of these cities there are lots of coffee shops, bars, restaurants, etc. that expats tend to attend. If you're in a small town like the one where I was before going to Halong, I was the only foreigner there, so I only had local friends. But it's also a very nice experience, because local people are really, really very nice. People experience was the best part of all my 1 year journey in Vietnam.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention one thing related to that. We briefly discussed it before we started the interview. I am a non-native speaker, and I was warned during the course as well, and it's kind of the way the teaching market works there. The language centers, the language schools in bigger cities, they tend to want prefer native speakers. That's why they kind of warn you that if you're a non-native speaker, at least for the first job, while you still don't have much experience or don't have any experience, you would be sent to a smaller town, a smaller city. And some people get a little bit nervous about that, but I just want to say that it's an awesome experience. It's an amazing experience, because in that way you see the most authentic life, away from tourist destinations, away from the crazy big cities. That's the most awesome and authentic experience that you can get. So it's like the first 5 months when I was working in this small town, that was just very, very nice experience from that perspective. You get to experience the country from the inside without having any distractions, without having any, it is the most authentic way of learning about the country. So that's something that also encourages you to make friends with the local people, because you just don't have any options. And that's also something that I would say, yeah, and that's also something that I would say no one should be scared about getting a job in a smaller town. It's just a totally different experience, but it's really worth it, and it's really very authentic and very nice, because I cannot say it enough. People in Vietnam are awesome. They are the most awesome part of your travel experience there. They are very, very nice.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm glad you brought that up, because literally my next question was going to be how being a non-native English speaker kind of impacted your experience. But I mean, you kind of touched on it already, which we talked about before the interview. So so that's great. So, you know, in reality, it impacted your first step, but after that, then it hasn't really made much of a difference, which is great.
Once you have some experience, you already can choose a job in a bigger city. It doesn't matter, because the demand is very big there. The demand in Vietnam is really huge for foreign teachers. That will just depend on your preference, which part of the country, what type of school do you want to work in, public or private. That's a different approach.
Yeah, but like you said, and you know, it's certainly been my experience when I was living in Thailand, is that you know, when you're in the big cities have certain benefits, and that's great. You know, there's lots of foreigners around, and there's lots of good things. But in reality, if you really want the authentic experience, then you've got to go outside of the cities. You've got to go into the more rural parts, or the less urban parts, rather, and that's where you get the authentic experience. So that's great. I'm glad you mentioned highlighted that as well. So Gayane, what did you get up to on weekends? What does a TEFL teacher do in their spare time?
Well, the best thing that you can do is travel, because you're there not only to work, but also to enjoy the country and discover the country for yourself. And it's actually very, very easy to travel in Vietnam. The main means of transportation is bus. Well, for closer places, it's obviously motorbike, but if you want to travel like long distance, there are bus connections to pretty much everywhere. Is there a question coming on? I just see something on my screen. Okay, sorry.
No, I'm worried.
So, and it's very easy to travel. There are bus connections pretty much from anywhere to anywhere. So, and which is even better. For most of the long distance destinations, they have the night buses. So basically, you can just get a bus Friday night and just travel the whole night, and don't waste your time travel like daytime traveling, and then you just have the full 2 days for yourself to enjoy. So that was one thing that I liked about Vietnam. Traveling there is very, very easy. Finding accommodation is also very, very easy. You can get accommodation from like very cheap hostels to very nice boutique hotels, depending on your budget and on your preference. So that was something that also made traveling very easy. Plus, Vietnam is very, very, very rich in places worth seeing. It doesn't matter which part of the city you end up working, north, south, middle, doesn't matter. Everywhere you can find some very nice national parks, very nice towns, villages, some nice hiking routes. It has very, very nice nature, very rich cultural heritage. So there is lots of places to go, no matter which part of the country you end up. So I took actually 1 month in between my two jobs. I took 1 month to just travel. I went from Cambodia all the way to Hanoi. So it's about 2,300 kilometers on the road by bus, and it was the most amazing travel experience. It was very, very nice.
Yeah, that's great. So it sounds like you kept yourself busy then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very beautiful country. There are so many things to see that, like even after living there for a year, there are still some very nice places that I want to go back and visit.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I've only spent a very short amount of time in Vietnam, and I was in Ho Chi Minh, and I really wanted to explore some of that. I'm not really a city person, even though I always seem to end up living in cities. But I prefer the countryside, and so I'm really looking forward to going back at some point, hopefully as a holiday, and spending some time in the more rural parts of the country. Because from everything I've heard from people, it's spectacular and it's beautiful. So yeah, I look forward to experiencing that myself. So. Do you feel like this whole experience has kind of changed you? Are you a different person to the person that went in at the beginning of this adventure?
Yeah, I am totally different. Well, I started the TEFL journey at a point where I was kind of lost, because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my career and where I wanted to go next, and I was very, very in a very dark place from that perspective. Let's call it that way. And this program actually came to save me from there, and I just cannot thank TEFL Heaven enough for this opportunity, because I actually just ran into your website just by accident, and it turned out to be the most amazing decision I have made in my life so far, and it really changed me a lot. I am much more relaxed, and because if you live in Asia, there is no other way. You just leave all your stressed out things aside, and you just learn to live with the flow and trust that everything is going to be very good. So that's something that I learned, and that's the biggest change for me. Just taking things easy and being open and trying new things and going for new opportunities. And also because I had some very challenging things during this 1 year in terms of learning tremendous amount of stuff. I know that I can learn anything, and I know that I can do anything. So that's something that I'm not scared of any new experiences now. Something that I am pretty sure that I will use. Plus, one thing that I was very much inspired by teaching. I really loved it. I in the beginning, I would never expect that I would love it that much. Now I'm considering it as my like something for the future as well. I want to go back to teaching. Now I'm back home for the summer. I have some projects to finish here, and then probably will continue teaching again from September.
Yeah, great. Well, literally my next question was going to be, what are you doing next? So that was going to be my question. So you're heading back to Vietnam in September, did you say?
Yeah, I want to. I have still some things to consider in Armenia, working on a couple of projects here, and then I will see what I'm doing next.
Yeah, cool. Well, it seems like you've got a lot of confidence from this experience, and I always think that like confidence is the catalyst for many good things. You know, it gives you that desire, and it gives you that self-belief, and you think, okay, well, whatever the opportunity that's presented, I can do that. You know, and that's an amazing thing. And if you take away one thing from this experience, I guess that's a really valid thing. So that's great. Well, Gayane, I've got one last question for you then in that case. It's the question I would like to ask last, which is, if you were to give any advice to anyone that's thinking about living and teaching in Vietnam, anything that, you know, hindsight has taught you, what advice would you give to somebody?
Not to think about it too much and just go for it. That's something that I was telling to myself, because I'm the kind of person that, like, when you think about something too much, you start, and what if this happens? What if that problem comes up? But it's risky, but is it really worth it? And all these worms start moving in your head, and then you start weighing things, and you're saying, okay, no, maybe it's too risky. So, and I knew that I was like that. So when I just had this idea of going to Vietnam, I just said, okay, no thinking, go for it. Buy the tickets, then you will think. So, because if you think about it too much, you will just, if you don't have the confidence, if you don't have the experience, you will always find reasons why you should not do it, which is not the good approach. The good approach is to do it, to just go for it, and you will not regret for 1 second. I haven't regretted any single day of this more than 1 year experience that I have had. It was awesome all the way, and I would just suggest go for it. Doesn't matter which country you choose, it's an amazing experience. Living in Asia, it's a totally amazing experience. Doesn't matter which country you end up living in. So just go for it.
That's great. Take the leap of faith. That's your advice then. So that's great.
Yeah. Actually, one thing that I wanted to mention before I even applied for this program, I saw this one poster about with the quote, which is allegedly Mark Twain, I think, that 20 years from now you will regret more the things that you haven't done than the things you have done, something like that. I hadn't even seen your website, and I hadn't even started the application process, but I had this poster, and it was kind of in my mind all the time, and I was like, okay, I need to do something. I'm not happy with where I am. I need to do something. And this quote was all the time in my mind, and then I just accidentally found your website. I opened it and I saw this quote, And I'm like, okay, this is a sign I have to apply. that's actually the first reason why I chose TEFL Heaven. that was the first one. If that quote had not been on your website, maybe I would have just chosen a different company. That was the first thing that just caught my attention, and I took it as a sign and I applied. So 20 years from now, you will regret the things that you didn't do more than the things that you did do. So go for it.
Yeah, that's right. That's good advice. Really good advice. Sounds like you had an inspired journey to get to that point. So
yeah,
that's perfect. Gayane, cannot thank you enough for taking the time to talk to us today and talk to all of those people who have been and will be watching this video, no doubt, afterwards. So so thank you very much again. We really appreciate you giving all your advice and wisdom and hindsight. It's very, very helpful. And we will no doubt hear from you again in the future. I know because you were involved in some blogs and information before, and I'm very confident that you'll probably be doing that again in the future as well. So so yeah, it won't be the last we'll hear from you. But thank you very much for taking the time.
Thanks for the opportunity. Nice talking to you. And as like I said, I'm very happy to help anyone considering a Vietnam program with any information, any advice, any hints and tips, anything that people might need.
That's great. We'll really appreciate that. So thank you very much for the offer. You have it there, guys. You know who to contact. So thanks very much, Guy, and she'll catch you very soon. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.